probably the key thing for me when it all started to lock down, I was lying on a beach in Dubai, having a whale of a time. And so I got a few text messages from work to say, you better get back here because the airports are locking down. So so it was probably all hands to the pump. And as Richard mentioned, the focus really was either toilet rolls or bread. So our demand sort of went up significantly. So if I just take you through a few slides, just to sort of try and understand some of the process that we went through, which was around setting the agenda and then taking people with you and trying to do it the right way and then just summarising. So I think coming back from Dubai, first things first, it was that Captain Mannering moment of don't panic, because that was the easiest thing for everybody to do, because our demand from the consumer went up by about 31%. So for us, it was like Christmas every day, but with Christmas, you get 2 months, 3 months to plan, and it lasts for a week. The planning was days, and it's lasted for about 7 weeks. So the key thing for anybody really is to just take that step back and understand the size of the problem and try and break it down to bite-sized chunks. And coupled with that, it was probably keeping abreast with all current information. So that's where I would sort of use the networking, government networks. We've got a good central team. So keeping current with local, with national legislation and the changes is absolutely key. And one of the big things what's helped us in the last week or so was the government document around things we should be working towards. So if anybody's not got visibility of that, get on the government website, have a look, download it, and start developing a plan. So our plan was based on how do we meet 30% uplift in volume? How do we manage absence levels? So at our peak, to be fair, we was about 15% absence, where normally we're around about 3. So that's managing that, was working closely with our customers and looking at rationalising the range and producing, still producing white 50-50 wholemeal, but simplifying the range of products we produced and the on-label products so we could actually get the volume out, and then also standardising how they ordered it rather than in singles. We got them to order in full baskets. Added to that, then there's all this challenge around social distancing, and that applies to everybody. So we're all doing dances now if we go out, and sort of it's a bit like watching come dancing as you try and swerve your way around people. But in addition to that, it was also understanding the implications around self-isolation and people self-isolating. So getting a room for that, getting the right process and procedures for cleaning down, getting to ring 111, following the advice, following the instruction, and just changing the whole way of working. So that was probably how we looked at setting the agenda. And coupled to that, it's about building your risk matrix, looking at your safe systems of work, looking at all your sort of procedures around what do you need to do differently. And then when I've looked at taking people with you, and it's probably something we saw a couple of weeks ago with the presentation around lead, coach, manage, was really understanding sort of where people were. So if you look at the 3 stages of a pandemic response around survival, acceptance and growth, we're probably all in different boxes around that, and that's the same with my team. So first and foremost, it was about looking at new ways of working, and I think Michelle had mentioned in the introduction around working from home and being in work, and the language you use around that, because again, some people tell working from home having a jolly, and it isn't that, but that carries a lot of guilt and stigma, and then getting used to things like Zoom. Crikey, having never heard of Zoom 7 weeks ago, I think Donald's the expert, and we're just following. So, and it's key, because how you keep people sort of in touch is absolutely crucial. And then for us, it was forming a localised crisis management team. So once you've stopped panicking, understanding the frequency in which you meet, it's getting that action-driven agenda. So again, using the government documentation, doing a gap analysis of of where you are against that, and it's how you involve others and share ideas. And the thing I'd sort of ask everybody to think about is, are you communicating enough? And if you think you are, double it, because all of us, me included, and I can talk for Britain, aren't communicating enough with our people. And then it's really that coming back to that mental wealth check, as I picked up last week. And that's about seeing how people are. So again, with the new ways of working. And it's also about being innovative. So you don't need to look at how you can spend lots of money and develop new ways. Sometimes it's just a tin of paint and spraying the floor. If there's an arrow pointing one way, just be innovative, be creative. And if you involve people, you know, you will get more ideas. So in terms of doing it the right way, my challenge for myself and my team, and probably my learning, is you've got to keep it simple and don't complicate things. Have repeatable processes. And if it's difficult to understand, it's going to be difficult to follow. And another area is old favourite: plan, do, check, act. So a lot of us are very good at planning. A lot of us might be very good at doing, but sometimes you've got to go and check to see if it's working. And if it's not, act on it. And probably in today's world, that feedback action log is absolutely key. So whatever it is you're doing, log it, so that you've got a due diligence trail and you can actually demonstrate this is where we were and this is where we're going. And I think our biggest challenge with a site of 500 people, and probably if you look on the media, is behaviours. So we've developed what we call walk and talk audits. It's about changing people's behaviours, because, you know, there might be some people out there who might think, you know what, I'm going to jump in my car because it's sunny and go to a beach. You know, I doubt it, but, you know, you never know. And it's how you change that behaviour. And in terms of doing it the right way, with all this going on, always reach out to see if you can help the local community. And I think, whilst all the other is pressurised, if you want a release valve, being able to support your local community, and we've donated quite a bit of bread. I can't tell you how enriching that is, just to be able to help somebody else. And the key thing really is about that keeping in touch, because I think that's how you keep in touch with people is crucial, and keeping people up to date. So if I was to summarise, and it's all together now, I would say, first things first, stop, think, go in that order. I know I'd go on about that, but it is, just think of traffic lights. Before you do anything, stop and think. Over communicate. If you need photographs, and go through the you said we did. So again, for us to communicate with people all the time, we're taking photographs before and after. And one of the learnings for myself is with the team is, let's keep things factual. Because you listen to all the news briefings, for those on Twitter or Facebook, is how factual are things. So keep it factual and be kind. Involve your people. And then focus on what's important. So in order to meet a 30% uplift in volume and manage high absence levels and put in new ways of working, just focus on that important. And if you have to pause other things, do it. And again, there's lots of technology out there, so use it, but use it wisely. Because I've looked at thermal imaging cameras, and they can range from $1,000 to 12 grand. So you can spend lots of money, you might not need it. So again, stop, think, go. And the key thing in all that is around behaviours, really. And they're equally as important as all the simple, repeatable processes. And finally, the last thing I would say is, for each and every one of us, don't forget, we need a break too, for our own mental health and well-being.
Thank you very much for that, Carl. I know it must have been an amazing shock for you while you're lying on a beach to suddenly think about what you've got to come back to, and the great changes that you've got to put into place in sort of record time. So Thanks for sharing all that with us. And I know that Carl's going to be around, obviously, to answer questions from the panel later on. One of the things that you said there, Carl, which was we feel is very important, and I know that it's shared with Donald when we were speaking to Donald earlier on, is communicate. How it's so important to communicate to your team and your staff. So I think I'll hand over to Donald now. And Donald, if you can sort of share with us how you're planning to reopen Rollinson Knitwear.
Okay, so our themes are be sensible, be clear, and be kind. So probably take about 5 minutes. So just about us, and one of the things I'm proud of is we were ranked 5th best UK place to work for women, so that was good. But just a reminder that all employers in the region should really join the Great Manchester Good Employment Charter. We were the first 6, and it's superb. So if you could do that, that'd be brilliant. I read a survey this morning of 75,000 employees in the UK, and without reading them all out, obviously about a third of people are feeling vulnerable and anxious, and a third don't have confidence in the leadership. So I think that's really important, and that's my theme actually for today. So that survey was carried out by Carrion and Box. So if you want to have a look, just Google it. So there are themes ending with, well, starting and ending with be kind. So in mid-March, probably about a week or so before all this kicked off, we were looking after hygiene, we were issuing packs, we were learning what social distancing was, telling people not to come to work if they were showing ill, above all, to be flexible. And we said that the fat cats, people like me, would be getting pay cuts up to 50%, but we'd protect the lower paid. So that's the theme that we set, and we set out what we thought the next phase would be. And it was probably about a week or so after that the government announced this thing called furlough, which I didn't know what it was. And what we said to everyone was that because it was likely that most of us would be furloughed, we would pay the people furloughed half the difference between what the user got and the furlough pay, and that would carry on for quite a while. So I think that sort of helped to bond us all together, really. I was talking to somebody recently, and they said their big advice is don't listen to Donald. And I think my message is, yeah, you're right, and actually do the opposite. So I think that if you're not sure what to do, choose somebody that's an idiot and do the opposite. So that's my advice. Communications are big things. So as I said, most of us have been furloughed for about 7 weeks now. So we give a business update every week. That might be to do with the bank or funding or customers or whatever. My colleague Nick does stuff on well-being to keep everyone informed every week. We have these weekly video coffee sessions using Zoom. We always set out what we think will happen next, and sometimes we get that right, and that just helps people to prepare, really. Always tell the truth, show that you care about everyone, pay everyone on time and in full because the suppliers really need it, and always protect the lower paid. So what now? We're preparing to come back to work, most of us, in a couple of weeks. So my colleague Nick has done a training video and a quiz, and I'll show you a couple of slides from that. We've got new signage and markings and distancing points. We've done these things called risk assessments, and we found this expert called Michelle, who's coming in to sign it all off. So that'll be a challenge. And she'll be the person that's walking around with a clipboard, annoying everyone probably, because she's done it before. These are 2 or 3 of the slides that my colleague Nick did, and it starts with 3 millions, and I think one of them's me, and I'm the one with the one spectacle, and I think Nick's the small one. So I'm not sure what that means. And then it was that, and then this, and then that. But really, the video and the quiz is all about and asking people over and over again. Do you know what you're doing? What do you do if? And all those sort of things. So I think that's quite useful. Our return to work really is based upon be kind. And we know that everyone's different. Most of our people are desperate to come to work, actually. But what suits everyone? Everyone's got a different challenge. Some are desperate to come back and it's easy. Some people want that reassurance of having the safety stuff signed off and that it's safe to come back. It's Mental Health Week this week, so we should be mindful of that. What about the people that have got public transport? What about people who care for young children or for others? So I think our message is we need to be really flexible in who's up for coming to work or not. What do we need to do to make them feel happier? If they're on public transport, can they come in later, finish earlier, finish later? I get confused actually between WFH and WTF, but apparently you can work from home if possible, but I think most of our people would rather not, but we'll probably ask them to do. So, and finally, our themes are be sensible, be kind, and definitely don't listen to Donald. How's that?
Thank you very much for that, Donald. That was excellent. Thank you very much. I know that it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek there, but I do know that obviously you and your team work very well together and take all these things extremely seriously. So thank you for sharing that with us. That leads us on very nicely to look at, we've just had 2 examples of how Stockport businesses are managing to change and to bring about change in the workplace, and as we've all said in the past, you know, how do you make sure that you get your team on that same bus with you? And I think there's no better example than certainly Carl at Allied, as he's a great people person and he's very good at doing that, and it's good to see that Donald laying all the foundations for that as well. But that takes us very nicely on to talk to Michelle, because all these things are really important, but as Donald said, it's Michelle who at the end of the day will be able to come along and check that everything that you've done, check that it's been done properly, check that it's been done with very much keeping a safe working environment in mind, because without that we won't have the confidence in our teams and ourselves to actually return to work and to start to kickstart the economy. So it's really, really important. So Michelle, can I hand over to you now, please, and you can take us through about how we can make sure that we do this properly.
Yes, thanks, Helen. Hello, everyone. I shall just share my screen for the first time. So, yeah, obviously thinking about returning to work, the guidelines are still there. If people can work from home, that they should do. But one of the first things that I wanted to say was certain questions to ask as you're making these decisions about getting people back to work. One of them is, why are people coming back to work? Do they actually need to? If people can work from home, they should still work from home. You know, if there's a genuine business need, and I think I've mentioned it before, you know, if businesses are at risk of going under, that's the last thing that anybody wants. So people should be able to make an effort to get back into the workplace. What work will they do? Of course, that will depend on who you bring back as well, and what's essential and what's non-essential, and what can still be done from home, and what has to be done in the workplace. Who is able to return? So thinking about individuals and their needs, whether people are confident to come back to work, whether they feel safe, whether you've made them feel safe. And how will people get to work safely? Obviously, this is hot topic at the moment, and as the weeks go on, the public transport will get busier and busier. Some people won't be wearing masks. A lot of people won't be wearing masks because they don't think they need them. But it's something to consider. And how will they work? How will they be safe at work? And that's for the employers to put into place. But I just wanted to add this because I think it's something that I always have on my shoulder, which is what the law is asking employers to do. And it states that every employer must ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health, safety and welfare of all employees. But please remember, this is a shared responsibility. Your employers have got a responsibility as well in law to do the right thing when they're there. So whatever you put in place, they've got an obligation to comply with it for everybody's benefit. And what we mean by reasonably practicable is, and certainly in this scenario, talking about COVID-19, you better put the minimum in, the obvious. And I think we're in a privileged position from a health and safety point of view that I can't imagine anybody coming back into the workplace that doesn't know what's going on at the moment, because they'll have experienced it going shopping or whatever they're doing. People must know what the precautions are. So you've already got a head start there. Moving on then to the working safely. So the first thing is to carry out a COVID-19 risk assessment. So these are over and above all your other risk assessments that you've got in place for the activities that are going on in the workplace. It's quite specific. So it's looking at different things like developing your cleaning and hand washing and hygiene procedures. You might need to put extra things in place at entrance points and exit points and things like that. Have you got enough of them for the numbers that are coming back? Are they in the right place? You might need to add different things. Helping people work from home. Carl mentioned that before, that people working from home will be in their own specific circumstances. I've had incidents of where people have brought employees back into the workplace because they can't work from home because their their home environment is not conducive with working. Obviously maintaining the 2 meters social distancing where possible, and that's what the guidelines state, where possible. Where it can't be, you've got to manage the transmission risks, so putting different things into place. Factors to consider then when you're thinking about your risk assessment, and we think in these 4 terms for risk assessment. Human factors. What is it about human behaviour that can make things go wrong? We talked about different personalities, different risk levels of people. As we see every day on the news, some people don't care and a lot of people are frightened. So taking into account the human factor. The occupational factor, what are you asking people to do? What is the job? If you've got businesses that people generally work literally side by side, then clearly that's not going to be possible. So you're going to have to pay a bit more attention to that side of it and put them in different circumstances, which I'll come to. Environmental factors, and this is looking at the building as the image demonstrates that you've got where people are working. Is it big enough to comply with all the guidance that's expected of you? And if not, then you have to really consider, can we come back to work at this stage of the controls that we're being asked to put in place? And then organisational factors. So this is about leadership and management. How will the procedures that you put in place be managed? How will they be checked? And making sure that you've got the right and key people in the workplace that can communicate effectively. So the control measures then, just being a bit technical here, but I'm just opening you up to what goes on in my mind and how things ideally can be done. So obviously the first thing when we talk about risk assessments is you avoid it. And the easiest way to do that is people don't come back to work yet. That stops that. If you can't do that, you would look at substituting different things. So whether it's machinery, substances, equipment, and in this case, not sharing equipment. I think, things like hot desking, that has to stop. People bring their own equipment in. One of the companies that I work with, they're bringing their own asking their employees to bring their own cups, plates, cutlery, and take it home dirty. They're really going to that level to avoid it. And then we look at engineering controls, so isolating and then closing or separating, whether that's people working in different offices. Obviously, there's a lot of open offices now. There didn't used to be, but there are now. So that can make it a bit more tricky. But if you can put people in different areas, and in some cases people have still remained in work, but on different floors, that's absolutely fine. Thinking about the automation and mechanisation, you know, if you've got keypads, these touch points, there's touch points everywhere. And automatic doors, if you've got automatic doors, they're ideal because people don't need to touch them. Design layout, screens and ventilation, they're all pass points as well. So if you can think about that, you know, whether it's somebody going to the photocopier, who are they passing, how close are they passing? Reducing time exposure, we would also look at as well, and Donald's mentioned that about rotas and, you know, based on numbers and travelling times as well, so that the people are travelling at less busy times if they're on public transport. So there's lots of different ways you can reduce time exposure to reduce the risks. And then once you've decided what you're going to do, whether it can be any one or all of those, I would expect a mix of lots of different things for this. You would create a safe system of work. So that is, what are the new ways of working? And that then will create your new guidelines for the workplace. You would need to tell everybody what you're going to do. What are the new ways of working? So information, instruction and training, safety signage, posters, markings, making things obvious, bright colours, big. Because one thing about signage is it's usually only good for about 3 days. So it's got to be bold and it's got to be supported by other methods as well. So I think Nick's idea of a quiz is really good because you're reinforcing that they've got the knowledge. And reminding people as well, whether it's daily briefings would be a good idea, but you've got to tell people what you've put into place so they understand. And then last in the risk assessment and control measures is PPE. It's always the last, and for the simple reason that it relies on humans to do it right. So you would want to put all the other things in place before you assume masks and gloves in particular, because they might as well be a pair of hands. People can still be touching them and touching different things with the same gloves. They're a real falsehood in my experience. So that's just gives you some idea of things to think about as well. As Donald said and Carl has said, record what you've done to reduce the risks. I have a checklist for people working at home, so it's an individual one, whether you've had discussions with them or not, but just covers, have we done this, have we done that? And if you haven't, you can do it. It's a prompt as well. So talking with the workers, there must be a two-way communication. Going back to Donald's survey that he's read this morning, I think is really significant on how people feel at the moment, and just demonstrates that you've got no one particular type of person thinking the same way. So two-way communication is absolutely key. Taking into account higher risk people considerations, whether they've got people who are shielding at home, then they shouldn't be coming in, or they're certainly at a higher risk of taking it back into their home. People who are just really not comfortable with it at this stage, I think has to be a good consideration as well. And of course, that getting people to work. So getting in and out of the buildings, you know, you don't want a backlog of people waiting to get in and out. We don't want Tesco situations at the at your door. So thinking about that and staggering times. Work areas, again, thinking about cross points and touch points. You know, if you've got, I don't know, 2 metre gap between banks of desks, then that's not going to be enough for people to maintain 2 metres if they're passing. So you're going to have to put some sort of system in place, usually communication, it's the easiest way. Again, moving around when people go to the toilet, when they go and make a cup of tea. Common areas, again, thinking about those, what do you need to put in place, one person at a time, signage, making sure there's enough sanitising equipment there for everybody to use before and after. good hygiene and cleaning. Cleaning still needs to take place generally, but when do you get your cleaner in? Usually before or after the workplace, and what are they cleaning, and what do they want to clean? And making sure, of course, if they're contracted cleaners, that they've got their own policies in place as well. Legionella checks, that's something that's the HSE have picked up on. If businesses have been empty for a while, then the Legionella needs to be a consideration, because we're at the ideal temperatures for it at the moment as well. So if you've got any tanks of water hanging around, and even toilets, you need to make sure that they're checked and sanitised properly. And of course, fire, don't forget about fire evacuation emergency procedures. Walk the premises, make sure people, ideally, if they're evacuating, they can still maintain that 2 metre distance behind each other. And that would come as part of your policies at the beginning, to remind people that that's going to be needed. And once they're outside as well, that you've got the space for people to stand 2 metres apart. First aid and sickness, and contact details, making sure you've got up-to-date contact details of people if they do fall ill in the workplace. That will help a smooth dealing with somebody who becomes ill. And also thinking about, if somebody does become ill with any of the symptoms, how are you going to deal with that? Have you got a separate place, or are you just going to shove them outside the door? You must have some sort of process in place. And that's me.
Thank you very much for that, Michelle. That was extremely useful. I think it's quite amazing. It's quite daunting, actually, how much work needs to be done in making sure that the workplace is safe to return to, an awful lot for business owners and employers to obviously to take in. One thing I will say is that the Stockport Business Improvement District in Stockport, Totally Stockport, have actually just produced, or in the process of producing, a guide for businesses as to just a quick checklist, really, of everything that Michelle's been through, but just in a PDF format of what steps you need to be sure that you've ticked all those boxes correctly. I've asked if that's going to be available for everybody for me to mail out to everybody, whether they're in the bid area or not. But if you would like a copy, if you can let me know, then I can make sure that you do get one. It's just quite a useful document to have. So I think, just going on to some questions now, got one here from to all the panelists from Sarah. How do we do Legionella checks? Unfortunately, Sarah's computer froze and she's not quite sure whether you answered this, but how do companies go about doing Legionella checks, Michelle?
It's a specialist thing. Legionella checks should go on anyway for most businesses, checking the water that's coming out of your taps, and specifically if you have got any tanks of water that's feeding the site. But it is specialist company, so just Google a particular company. There's a very good one on Trafford Park, but I don't want to say any recommendations, but it is a specialist thing. But that's worth, if your premises have been empty for a number of weeks, then definitely. And of course it depends on the business as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I think there's one here that for either Carl or Donna, because you both got these circumstances. Somebody's asking here that they have a restroom for warehouse staff, and it's an important part of the break period, and they've got no other area to designate. What advice would you give to a company in that position? Carl, can I ask you first, please?
Certainly. I think it's probably around, can you stagger the breaks? How many people is it for? Can you lay it out differently so that you can get the distance? So I think those are probably the basics. Can you limit the number of people going at any one time, so that you can practice that? And I think it's probably then working with your teams and your people to say, look, these are the controls we need to put in place. These are the rules. How do we get them to work? But it depends on the number of people, I suppose, Helen, and how you're doing. So we've actually changed our layout in the canteen, and we've recognised it's not big enough. So we've actually turned our boardroom into a canteen. So again, you might, if you've got different offices, some people can eat at the desk, or can you look at some meeting rooms and convert those into places? It's just being creative If it's nice outside, can you get a couple of chairs, social distance? So
Yeah.
it's just that innovation around your thought process, and the more people you involve and engage, the more ideas you generate.
Thank you, Carl. Another question here.
Can I answer that? Helen, can I answer that?
Yes, of course you can, Donald.
I think we're recommending what Carl's just done anyway, and have your sausage sandwich at your desk if you can. So we're recommending that people bring their own food in, that you have it at your workplace if you can, that you stagger breaks, and I think we're only allowing 5 or 6 people in at any time anyway. So I think that's the best handle. But yeah, have your sausage sandwich while you're at your desk, Carl. Yeah.
Like he is. Excellent. Got another question here. I don't know. You can probably all answer this in your own way. What do we do if we have staff that should be returning to work, but they're reluctant to do so, even though they have been assured that social distancing can be observed and PPE is available? Who's willing to answer that?
I'll let one of the bosses answer that.
That'll be you, Donald.
Go back to you then, Carl. Can we come back to you, Carl?
Well, I think you take each individual person on the merit, because again, going back to the well-being of individuals, it's also understanding where they are in that curve, and it's how you can support them to come back in, and understanding sort of what further things could you put in place just to give them that level of reassurance, and it's probably just developing that relationship and approach, because we have a number of people shielding. In 4 weeks' time, there's going to be a decision around shielding. Some of those may be able to return, and it's understanding what that is, and some of them may be reluctant. And I think it's an individual case-by-case basis, and understanding where they are in that sort of change curve. And if they're really anxious, it's how you support that. Clearly, there will be an endpoint at some stage, but I think where we are, you've just got to gently let it unravel and manage it through and support them wherever you can. And if you have any sort of external support, so we're quite fortunate, we have an employee assist program, so we'll be contacting them, we'll be getting in touch with our occupational health, we'd be sort of looking at our risk assessments and point of work risk assessments, and then getting them involved in that to say what further things could we put in place to help. Don't know if that helps.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for that. Michelle, I've got one for you here. Are there any on-site swab tests that people can do to detect COVID-19 on handles and furniture?
Not that I'm aware of, and I think that's almost the last thing that you want to do. I think your priority is make sure that these handles and doorknobs and touch points are cleaned on a regular basis. I think at all opportunities, getting everybody doing their own, and then a periodic, depending on how busy the area is, a periodic, whether it's hourly or every half an hour, somebody goes round again and does them. One of the I suppose the most concerning areas is going to be the toilet, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Because it's a private place, and who knows whether somebody does wipe the handle after they've flushed it. So I think this before and after is a key thing to have in as a process. Yeah,
and everybody's probably got a bottle of that knocking around on the desk and everywhere. So so I'll set an example. Wash your hands and use it.
Yeah, good.
I think hand sanitizers are really, really important, and also making disinfectant wipes available to everybody, maybe having them on the desk as well as the hand sanitizers and preparing that way.
Yeah, I would say you just really want to make sure that and that comes into you've done everything that is reasonably possible. If everything's provided, there really is no excuse, is there, for people not to do these things.
And if because I know there's been a challenge around buying things, but you can also get cloths or J cloths and get sanitizer and soak them in that. Just be creative There's always a way.
Yeah, yeah. I've just got one on email here. We have all our staff working from home, and I do believe our new normal will embrace remote working as key regular working practices. What advice will panellists provide to a concern that people working from home may not take their safety responsibilities seriously, i.e. bad posture, poor chair, desk? Could we be storing up issues in terms of against the company for the future?
Shall I answer that?
Yes.
I think the answer is yes. I think initially, when people were sort of sent home, I admit I missed a trick, because I should have, where possible, told people to take the chair home, because everybody has different things available to them, don't they? You know, some people might be under the stairs. It is the employer's responsibility to make sure that wherever their staff are working, that they're working as safely as possible. You can do individual risk assessments. Some employers go as far as send me a photo of your environment to make sure that it's safe. You know, it could be they're working in, I don't know, some people are hoarders, aren't they? They could be enclosed in everything, and they're saying, no, I'm fine working at home. But in you know, a few months' time, or in 12 months' time, when they're complaining of chronic back pain and they come back to the employer, then it will be the employer's responsibility, unless they can prove that they've done all that is reasonably practicable. You know, there is a lot of trust around health and safety, that people do what they're supposed to do as well. But it is the employer's responsibility to make sure that that they're working in a reasonable condition at home. And again, I've got a checklist that's available for them to do that.
Okay, Michelle, thanks very much for that. From Alison, is there a list of Stockport businesses who provide PPE, desk screens, etc., so we can support local businesses? Well, I can help you to answer that. On the SK Business Recovery website, we are pulling together a list of local suppliers who can supply all that information. And if anybody wants any information on that, please email me, and if I've got any contacts, I'll certainly send them out to you. But I know that I had an email from Egan Reid, for instance, this morning, who can provide a lot of the equipment that is needed for desk screens and for stickers for the floor, etc., etc. So again, we want, it's very important that we do support local businesses through this time. So take a look on the SK Business Recovery website, and you'll be able to sort of hopefully contact some local manufacturers and suppliers on there. If anybody else has got anything that they can share, Donald or Carl, have you been able to source any of the equipment that you need locally?
We've been probably quite fortunate, just with how we operate as a business, to have sufficient stock, so we haven't really run out of anything at all. And what we've been able to sort of buy, we do try and purchase locally if we can. Good.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, because as I say, keeping the local economy going is really, really important. I don't know whether, Michelle, you can answer this or not, but are there any quick wins that businesses should deploy regardless of sector? What would you say are the real quick wins?
The quick wins are to put the obvious controls in place, and the number one is the distancing, isn't it? That is absolutely number one. That's not disappeared and won't disappear, I don't think, for quite a while yet, while the numbers are still like they are. Yeah, that's the main one, isn't it? The distancing. Like you saw before, PPE is the last thing. It goes so far, but we've all seen people on the television with the mask just over the mouth when it should be over the nose, and pinched and all the rest of it. So the quick wins are to try and get that social distancing in place, and looking at the communal areas where people are used to congregating, and just putting some sort of controls in there and making sure everybody's aware of it. And I think the big thing is, and both Carl and Donald have mentioned it, is communication. Tell people what you're doing, and ask them, how's it working? And if it's not, people are part of the solution then, aren't they? And they're involved, and people like to be involved.
Thank you. I think the ability to socially distance is the key to so many things, but I guess public transport, people who actually cannot get into work any other way than on public transport, that's going to be quite a challenge in its own right. And I do know that the government have published some guidance on that, which is available from the gov.uk site. If you Google that, you'll be able to find it. And also, Transport for Greater Manchester have now produced their own guidance as to how to use public transport across the city region in a safe and responsible way. So I guess if you can download that as well, or request some guides and give those out to your teams, I think that's probably a very beneficial thing to do for them as well.
I think one thing just to mention on that as well, Helen, is when people have been working from home or haven't been working, whilst they might practice social distancing if they go to the supermarket, they're not in their own environment. So again, it's all about behaviours, and it's all about approaching that in the right way, because most people do not come into work to do a bad job, and don't come into work to break rules. So again, it's how you probably manage that transition back in.
Yeah, again, very much so. I've just had a quick email here from Christian, who has sent me a link to people who can supply socially distancing stencils. So again, if anybody would like to hear about those, just pop me an email and I can send you the link. Oh, and Office Zone, thanks Angie. Office Zone have also said they have all the necessary screens, etc., and a wide range of PPE available. Office Zone are on Hillgate in Stockport, so contact Angie Hazeldine if you need anything from that. Any more questions from anybody before we wrap up? If anybody does have any further questions, please email them to me, because as in our first webinar, we couldn't get through all the questions, but what we were able to do was to put them to the panel at a later date, and they have now been uploaded to the SK Business Recovery website, which we will do exactly the same with this. We'll put a video recording of this webinar up on the website, along with any questions that have been asked and the answers that we've found. So, Richard, panel, is there anything else that you'd like to add to this?
No, I would just say you just do everything that you can. We're all well aware, because we've been living it for the last 8 or 9 weeks, of what we have to do or can't do when we go shopping. It isn't any different in the workplace. But quite rightly, as Carl said, it's different to what you've been doing at home. We're not used to being 2 meters apart. I think the accepted distance is 1 meter for personal space. So we're used to being around that, between that 1 and 2 meters. So it is a bit different. But I think self-policing and asking people to remind each other, like Carl said, they've been doing dances and just making it a bit of fun, and although it's serious, but bringing some humour into it as well to make it stick, because we're learning new ways of interacting with people, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. Great, that's superb. Well, thank you very much for everybody who attended, everybody who's contributed. Thank you very much to our panel for taking part. And also, can I just say, there's one, if we leave you with one thought, it's something that Richard came up with a couple of weeks ago that is now on the SK Business Recovery website. It's okay to move away. Thanks very much, everybody.